The 1964 World's Fair yielded so many Disneyland attractions that the public was very eager to see them at their new home in Disneyland. Great moments with Mr. Lincoln.
Walt was a great admirer of Abraham Lincoln. This is, I believe I remember him saying that even as a youngster he had portrayed Abraham Lincoln at his school on a Lincoln birthday or something of the sort. So Walt asked me to give it some thought, and I did a number of things of how simple things work in anatomy, how perhaps a mechanical hand could work. This was rather naive in thinking, because really our problem was not to create a mechanical man, but was rather to create an illusion. Mr. Lincoln would have to rise from a seated position, move one leg forward, and then put himself up into a standing position. We had great technical difficulties in getting the character to move properly in New York, and God, it would be going great, and then all of a sudden he would do a great jerk or decide to sit down.
The great moments with Mr. Lincoln was a very difficult one to do, because they were just learning about them, and it was hard to you had to do the whole track perfect. If any little jerk or anything else happened, you had to start all over again. And everybody was very nervous and uptight about it, and it didn't open at the same time the park opened. I think they were about 2 weeks late.
By golly, Mr. Lincoln went all the way through. Matter of fact, we were so successful with this in illusion that the reviewer, I think for the New York Times, saw it and explained how Mr. Lincoln stood up and walked forward on the stage and gave his address. So the illusion was pretty good.
And then when it did open, it was quite a success, excepting the Japanese pavilion was next door, and they were giving out free ball bearings to people. And what happened was they'd go there and get the ball bearings, and then they'd go see Great Moments with Mr. Lincoln and throw the ball bearings at him, and to see if he'd scream ouch, because they thought it was a real person looking like an automatronic figure. And what it did was, to go out to work on the figure or try to do anything, it would be worth your life, because you were walking on all these little ball bearings and you couldn't keep your balance. You were sliding all over. So they finally went over and asked him to stop giving them away, because it was causing a number of injuries.
The dinosaurs from the Magic Skyway attraction. The phenomenal It's a Small World.
The Small World ride was a difficult one, because we had exactly 1 year to design it, make the costumes and the figures, choose the color patterns in this, do the sets, put it all together on the #1 sound stage at the studio, tear it all down, ship it to New York, get to New York and put it all together in 1 year. And we did it, but it wasn't easy.
And the hit of the fair, and the wonder of the new Tomorrowland, General Electric's Carousel of Progress.
Welcome to the General Electric Carousel Theater.
Disneyland brought the carousel and its sponsor, General Electric, to Disneyland in 1967. While the Sky Dome Spectacular that played on the dome of the Carousel Theater at the World's Fair was gone, most of the pavilion came over intact to Disneyland. The fabulous model of Progress City, the model city of tomorrow, was placed on the Carousel Theater's second story, and guests could experience a spectacular view of this model aboard the People Mover.
A model city of the future. It's based on a concept developed by Walt Disney for a community he called Epcot, Experimental Prototype City of Tomorrow. Realistic to the smallest detail, this animated model is a living blueprint of new ideas and systems for future cities. The concept for Epcot is one part of Walt Disney's master plan for the future Disney World in Florida. The city of tomorrow, possible today with the technology and imagination of American industry.
Below Progress City was one of the most popular Disneyland attractions of all time, the Carousel of Progress audio animatronic show. The carousel chronicled 4 time periods of American life in the 20th century and became a showcase for the great things come to life from General Electric. The show's theme song, written by the Sherman Brothers, was in fact a song they wrote especially for Walt Disney, and even though they never told him, they wrote it specifically about him. In late 1973, General Electric wrote to Disney requesting the show be moved to its all-new Walt Disney World. General Electric reasoned that the World's Fair ran from 1964 to 1965, and since the carousel had already been there since 1967, it was long overdue to take this message to a new audience.
General Electric had yanked their show from Disneyland because they said that 80% of the people that came to Disneyland were Californians, and they would see the same show over and over again so that they wouldn't get the advertising that they wanted.
Disney World was the perfect venue, as many Europeans as well as Americans on the East Coast would visit it more than Disneyland, and that meant more sales of fabulous modern GE appliances. So faced with losing a very lucrative sponsorship deal, Disney conceded, and the Carousel of Progress was packed up and moved to Florida adjacent to If You Had Wings. That left the new Tomorrowland with a carousel theater sitting empty. The very large and very visible carousel building needed a new attraction. Disneyland's latest addition at the time was the Country Bear Jamboree show, and it was an amazing success, featuring the voices of Pete Renaday, Thurl Ravenscroft, and created by Disney legend Mark Davis.
When I started working down there was nothing that was funny in any of the attractions that I can recollect. And this was the thing all the way through that I have tried to do is to bring in humor. I did the redo of the Jungle River ride, and I added the elephant pool and the trap safari and that sort of thing to that. And I think that trap safari was probably the first laugh that Disneyland had in the attraction.
So they had this empty building, and they wanted a show for it. So this was the first time that Mark did a show all the way through without Walt. Walt had seen the bears, but Mark had designed the stage and such for the Bear Jamboree, and finished it without Walt, but Walt was in the beginning of it. So this was the first show that was all Mark.
The dynamic team of Mark Davis and Albertino, who just the year before created the characters and music for Country Bear Jamboree, were asked to create an attraction for this carousel theater, being mindful that the 200th birthday of America was just a few years away.
One of the best things about working on Country Bear Jamboree was getting to know Mark Davis, and just in passing conversation, asking him what might be on his drawing board for the future. He was responsible for so many of the attractions that went into Disneyland, and he happened to comment on the fact that there was an attraction coming up also featuring characters much like in Country Bear Jamboree. It would be a musical, somewhat like Country Bear Jamboree, but it would feature the music of all across America, entitled America Sings, oddly enough. And so one thing led to another. He apparently liked some of the work that I and my colleagues had done on the Bears, and then we moved right on into production fairly quickly for America Sings and figure finishing.
In total, there were over 50 characters created by Mark Davis in this cabaret-style show.
We were looking toward a 1974, June, I believe, of 74 deadline, where we essentially had about 9 months for all of figure finishing. Now, figure finishing includes anything to do with fur, with feathers, with costuming, with painting, anything that helps dimensionalize what Mark had on the two-dimensional design page that we had to make fully three-dimensional.
The music was that of the popular styles of American music from 1776 to the present 1970s. 200 years of American music.
Mark chose all the music and such for the show. He liked very much working with Burl Ives to do the narration and such on it.
Yankee Doodle. Yes, folks, that was America's first popular song. And that's what this show is all about. America's music.
And Burl Ives enjoyed it, but Chill Wills would not go on the ride. Chill Wills did the voice for the turkey.
Now I went to the boss to draw my roll, and he had me figured $9 in the hole.
But he wouldn't go into any building that moved. He was sure he was be killed. Very strange. He wouldn't go anywhere near it. And he didn't stay for all the function of the opening of it, because he wasn't going to have anything to do with a building that moved like that.
Mark and Albertino pored over records and sheet music, trying to find just the right mix of styles for this 20-minute musical snapshot of America.
Big Al worked mostly on the lyrics. The overall show, the different animals and that was all Mark, and the gags.
Listening to the sirens' old song down in the licensed saloon.
America Sings was on a bit of a rushed schedule. One of the things that was coming up was, of course, the bicentennial, and this was quite appropriate to have this celebration of American music, the different types of American music from the South, from the West, from all over in different eras of American music.
I think the music part was his idea, that nobody had really done more or less the history of music from starting in the United States up to the present time. And he thought it would be fun to have all the different, the jazz, the blues, and the rock and roll.
Okay, boys, that's the line and jive.
You ain't nothing but a hound dog, rocking all the time. You ain't nothing but a hound dog, rocking all the time.
The show would have 4 acts: the Old South.
The characters that he did for America Sings went along with the music of that time, and like the characters of the singing, Gonna Lay Down My Burden down by the riverside, that was the blacks singing. It was their song.
The Wild West.
I've been working on the railroad to pass the time away.
The Gay 90s.
Now, Bailey, won't you please come home? Come on home, Bill. Goes Weasel.
And Modern Times.
I loved the finale with the birds on the motorcycles. And I don't know if you noticed, but that the year that the show opened, that somebody did a float for the Rose Parade, and it was the 2 chickens on the motorcycles, copied exactly.
All held together by a slightly modified version of the famous song Yankee Doodle Dandy.
Yankee Doodle always says, the past is just a start. Tomorrow will bring songs to you that come straight from the heart.
In fact, Mark Davis modified the song enough that he became a registered songwriter.
And so he had to fill out some papers or something in regards to having his name on the music bit and this, and that he would be paid for it. And they did the record, and they sold the record and all this. And Mark got a check for, I think it was either 79 or 97 cents. And to this day, we still get sheets that are sent in the mail from Mark, and it's zero. Mark said, gee, I'm sorry I cashed that check. He said, I should have framed it.
Mark's drawings portrayed the humor he was known for, while giving definite personality to a flock of geese, alligators, and the two stars of the show, Sam the Eagle and Ollie the Owl.
Sam the Eagle was clearly the star of the show, along with Ollie the Owl, because they took over the narrative responsibilities of moving you along through story from one type of music in one scene to the next. The most memorable to me, my favorite, were two animals, or two birds, that actually had probably the most subtle animation, and those were the two buzzards in the Going West sequence. Because of the subtlety of their head moves and the way their necks would crane up and down and the way that they would scan the audience, it appeared as if they were actually looking right at you while you were seated in the audience.
The task of transforming the drawings of Mark Davis to audio animatronic characters fell into the hands of numerous skilled artists at WED.
There was a girl who I had been training to work with the audio-animatronic figures, and her name was Alice also, Alice Morgan. And she did the costumes for the Bears and for America Sings, and she did a very good job.
My specific role on America Sings was working directly with Mark. I was part of a 7-person figure finishing team. He would come to us with the design, and at the same time that we were looking at his final colored version, Mapo was constructing the insides, the mechanical animated wizardry that they do so well. Now, to go from this steel and hydraulic tubed robotic looking piece to what Mark had on the page was the challenge that was posed to us. So we had to turn these robots that were being delivered from next door, there on Flower Street at WED Enterprises at the time, through the use of fur and feathers and various other materials. Basically, what we received from Mapo in figure finishing was the mechanical innards that had a butyrate or clear plastic form over it that would give the body shape that Blaine Gibson, the sculptor at the time, had already formed, and the mold had been taken. There were beaks out of fiberglass or epinol, which is also hot melt, also facial areas on things like the pigs or the possums that needed to look a little bit fleshy, and then it was up to us to take those elements and make the transition. I keep stressing the fact that we used a lot of fur, but those of you familiar with the show and those of you that watch the show will see that there aren't a lot of animals, a lot of critters with fur on them, like with Country Bear Jamboree. Most of the characters are feathered, such as is the case with the geese, with the chickens, and that posed a problem because feathers, again, do not clean very well, so we came up with a method of patterning a chunk of fur in whatever color it happened to be. Let's take the geese, for example, white fur, and then we would take scissors after it was draped over the figure and cut back in on a cross diagonal fashion, which then emulated the hanging of feathers off the wing. Not really feathers. There were feathers here and there just to give a little bit of an indication, but by and large the fur was much more maintenance friendly. You have to remember that it takes quite a bit to drive these characters. The analog, the pneumatic, the hydraulic power behind these was pretty powerful stuff. If you got a little bit too close, as one of my colleagues did, to the can-can chickens and happened to be working over the top of the head, you might get a kick in a certain part of your anatomy that you would remember long after having worked on that animal.
As opening day neared, several full-scale tests were carried out in Glendale to test the show's entertainment value. Everyone knew they had another hit on their hands, despite a certain weasel that seemed to rear his ugly mug at the end of each act.
Goes the weasel.
Because those of us who worked on it day in and day out, while the soundtrack was playing, would hear, "Pop goes the weasel." None of us, of course, were armed at the time with anything other than maybe a rubber band shooter, because had that been the case, we might have ended up with far less weasels in the show.
Goes the weasel.
By the time we completed the figures that were sent to us from MAPO, they were done in the figure finishing department at WED and are ready to be shipped down to Disneyland, to the attraction itself. We do one final run through with all the characters completely assembled, because they are programmed in the warehouse in the back there on Flower Street. Once all of that is complete and Mark Davis, Albertino, who were the head of the director, the writer, and designer of the show, bought off on this entire sequence, that particular segment, let's say it's the Going South segment, then that whole thing, lock, stock, and barrel, gets bubble wrapped, put on pallets, sent down to Disneyland. There was a hand-select crew of us who were sent down to the field to shoehorn this in. Now, when I say shoehorn it into the Carousel of Progress, I mean that literally, because the Carousel of Progress, as you remember, was not designed for America Sings. America Sings took over for the General Electric Carousel of Progress. So a cast of 114 characters, sort of like would cover the entire stage at Radio City Music Hall, had to be concentrated within this tiny little theater. That's actually part of the charm of the show, that we fit so many characters into this small show space. It was a big headache, however, for those of us that were in charge of having to fit them all in.
All was ready for the unveiling to the press in June of 1974.
The newest addition to Tomorrowland is a lighthearted look at American music. America Sings. Eagle Sam takes guests on a tour of our nation's musical heritage with stops in 4 eras: the down-home setting of the early South, the adventurous life of the Old West, the fast-living days of the gay 90s, and the rockin' renditions of modern times.
The day they were having the big opening, Al was with Mark on stage, and they had all the press out in front, and they started to interview them, and I don't know whether he walked backward or just forgot the hole was there and walked forward, and where is your wandering boy tonight? Choom! He went down the hole, and so instead of having the show get the publicity that they were hoping for, they got Big Al being carried out on a stretcher to the ambulance. And Mark said he didn't fall down the white rabbit's hole, he fell down the gray rabbit's hole.
A special press-only record album was made and handed out to the throngs of international press on hand to record the event of the opening of the first attraction created without Walt Disney. This was pure Mark Davis, and the press just loved it. Press day at America Sings was like the opening of a Broadway show, with some changes taking place before the show played to the public. In fact, one of the songs had to change.
Who shot the hole in my sombrero?
Who Shot the Hole in My Sombrero? They did it with a Mexican accent, and boy, they were up in arms over it, and they had to change it. If you notice, a short while later, it was with a Texas accent.
Who shot that hole in my sombrero? Who put that bullet through my head? Who shot that hole in my sombrero? Who would do a terrible thing like that? I can't figure who pulled that trigger. You don't reckon my old wife could be back in town?
It had to do with the history of music and what times were like at that time when cowboy music was popular. And that was in the 30s. That was when the Grand Ole Opry started. National broadcasting on radio.
Only a few months after opening day, America Sings was closed. Disneyland suffered one of its most gruesome accidents, the decapitation of one of the cast members working as a hostess on America Sings.
Unfortunately, he had the stage lowered slightly, and they did some other changes. And when it first opened, there was a young girl working on it. She was an honor student at college and this, but she was always fooling around, and she didn't stay on the chair like she was supposed to. And she would lean out and lean between when it would come to close, and she would see how long she could stay there before she pulled back in. And unfortunately, she didn't pull back in time, and her head was mashed. And she was killed, and Mark was devastated by it. And her parents were suing, and the people who were in the other side of the wall saw her doing this, and so the parents lost the lawsuit because she wasn't on the seat where she was supposed to be in that. But Mark always felt that was his fault by lowering the stage.
As the years passed, America Sings remained a favorite attraction of Disneyland guests. It graced the cover a few times of guidebooks, as well as the Disneyland publication Vacationland. In Florida, the Carousel of Progress had seen better days. General Electric decided that the theme song, It's a Great Big Beautiful Tomorrow, didn't fit the retail mentality of the corporate officers. They wanted the public to buy now, not tomorrow. So the Sherman Brothers were forced to write a new song for the Carousel of Progress, called, appropriately enough, Now is the Time.
And yes, dear, you're right. Now is the time.
Why don't we all sing?
Now is the time. Now is the best time. Now is the best time of your life.
They hated doing it, and the two often used this song as an example of a bad song. They said the difference between a great song and a bad song was, Great Big Beautiful Tomorrow was a great song. They wrote it about the man they loved, Walt Disney, and this retail song was one that was forced upon them. And it sure sounded that way too. Back at Disneyland in 1987, America Sings was still going strong, but seemed a little dated. America's bicentennial ended more than a decade ago.
It was one of my very favorite shows, and I was terribly upset when they closed it. He was very proud of it, and he thought it was one of his better pieces, and that everybody liked it, but he also felt that it was doomed because of the girl being killed.
In fact, during the construction of Star Tours, 2 of the geese were removed and transformed into droids for the second room of the pre-show area. Stripped of their feathers, all that was left were their long necks and webbed feet. The flocks of 4 geese were cut to just 3.
2 of the geese got pulled over to Star Tours as droids, so fortunately they have gainful employment there.
Hey, are you all together today? Are you sure? Okay, you had me worried there.
Meanwhile, over in Bear Country, there was quite a ruckus going on. It seemed there was a giant hole in front of the Country Bear Playhouse. A new log ride was coming to Disneyland, based on the popular but rarely seen film, Song of the South. Splash Mountain was a major attraction and was sure to be a hit for decades to come. The area known as Bear Country would be changed to Critter Country to reflect the new demographics of the area. However, audio animatronic characters were very expensive, and with America Sings' shrinking audience, it was decided to close the Carousel Theater and move the figures across the park to their new watery home.
He was very upset about it. He didn't go on Splash Mountain, and neither did I, but everybody said that they felt that it was America Sings up there because of all the different characters.
In revisiting the characters in our new home, because Splash Mountain has both the thrill aspect of the ride as well as the show portion of the ride, and the show portion of the ride reflects much of the music as was in Song of the South, it seems very natural to see the characters, and many of them look exactly the way that they did when they were back in America Sings, particularly on board the showboat, when they're all carrying on and celebrating there in the middle of that giant showroom. It's actually like visiting a lot of old friends.
Mark thought it was pretty awful. There was a fair amount of jealousy there because Walt bought everything that Mark did and he didn't buy what they did.
So from 1988 to 1998, the Carousel Theater sat vacant. A sign out front informed guests that a new attraction was in the works, and again the Carousel Theater sat empty.
Every generation has to have their place and time, so I can't complain too much.
In Florida, GE dropped its sponsorship altogether of the Carousel of Progress, and all references to GE were cut, and the song and the show were restored to their 1964 World's Fair glory days. The next year, 1989, Splash Mountain opened at Disneyland. It was certain that although America Sings was gone, the figures would live on for decades to come.